Welcome to the Sales Leader Roundtable, a show where we explore, share, and learn about trends in leadership and sales acumen. A place that provides our audience valuable insights, advice, and best practices from trusted members of the sales leadership community. Now, let's welcome KENDLEY Davenport and Jim DIEBOLD to this episode of the Sales Leader Roundtable.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Sales Leader Roundtable TV and radio broadcast. We're so appreciative of Dr. Jacqueline and USA Global TV for trusting us with this great time slot. For all those who are interested, you ought to check out USA Global TV. They have tons of content of all varieties from all over the world. A really fantastic both website and YouTube channel. That's USA Global TV. Really fantastic content. Well, you didn't come here today to hear about everything US Global TV is doing. You're here to learn about the Sales Leader Roundtable. And let me tell you what our show's about today. Our show will explore topics of leadership and sales acumen from some of the leading thought leaders in this space. Our goal is to bring you actionable and practical information that allows you to immediately grow your teams or your leadership skill set. My name is KENDLEY Davenport. I'm your co-host along with Jim DIEBOLD. Jim, I am so grateful we can take this journey together.
KENDLEY, journey is the right word for sure. We've been together for over a year at the Sales Leader Roundtable, and I am so appreciative that you have included me on this, being able to participate in your vision for helping sales leaders find a space where they can collaborate.
Well, that's fantastic. That's been fantastic, Jim. And, we've had a great couple of years with the Sales Leader Roundtable. It's a really building platform, but this is an extension of that. This is where we really get to take some of the great topics that we talk about on a monthly basis in detail and sort of highlight them a bit with some of the greatest thought leaders in the country. So with that, Jim, why don't you introduce our upcoming guest so we can get him on the show and get this program going?
Absolutely. And thank you for that. So I get the pleasure of introducing Rocky LaGrone to you guys. Rocky's a seasoned sales development expert with over 30 years in sales development and sales hiring systems, tools, and processes. As a sales veteran, Rocky has worked with a myriad of organizations from global billion-dollar organizations to small growing companies and everything in between. Throughout his career, he has worked intimately with thousands of companies of all sizes in various industries and have found one thing to be true. Transition and change in business is not only difficult, but inevitable. He thrives in the evolutionary environment, undergoing a new product offering, new leadership, new technology, and changing business landscape, having experienced each of these many times with his clients. So KENDLEY, why don't you go ahead and show us and introduce us, Rocky LaGrone.
Good afternoon,
Rocky.
everybody.
Glad to have you, sir. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, KENDLEY. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate the opportunity to be a guest. I've been working on this and thinking about this since we talked a couple of months ago, KENDLEY, and really want to thank you guys for what you guys do without me being a guest anyway, but great community you guys are building and just great information you guys are getting out there for the marketplace and good stuff for everybody to tune into. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, we're so glad to have you. And boy, are we excited about this topic. Rocky, me and Jim both have been hearing from lots of people we come in contact with that everyone is buzzing about what to do in this recession or this pending recession that we keep hearing about. We keep seeing layoffs across a broad spectrum of businesses. We see businesses sort of preparing for some type of recession. No one really knows what it's going to feel like or what it's going to be. So I think your topic is extremely timely and wise. So I want us to just sort of dive into this process right away and talk about these 5 mandatory sales skills that are required in a session. So I guess I'll get us started, Rocky, with the first question. What are these 5 mandatory skills that you keep speaking about?
Thanks for asking, KENDLEY. And that is a question a lot of people have on their mind today. Is it a recession? Is it not a recession? Are the job reports going to be low? Or are they going to blow everybody out of the water? Is the next interest rate hike going to impact our business? Is another big tech layoff going to cause problems for their vendors, their suppliers, and down the line as things tend to go? And I don't think anybody has a good answer to that other than we know for the last 18 months, there has been some change in the marketplace. And we know that we are facing some pretty difficult economic headwinds. And part of that unknowing is what makes people nervous. But one of the things you don't have to be nervous about is what does it take for your salespeople to be more effective in the economic headwinds than other times. So to answer your question quickly, it's based on 35 years of sales development. This will be our 5th recession we've worked through and helped companies with. 35,000 different companies, 2.2 million salespeople, and the largest database in the world on sales and sales findings and skills and strengths. So with our partnership with Objective Management Group and being able to represent their products, we've got access to that database. And what we know is that people have to be able to, salespeople specifically, have to be able to find new business because some business is going to go away. We can't just live with attrition. So hunting skills are super important. When you think about once you find someone to talk to, we've got to be really getting that decision maker involved very early. And obviously we'll talk more about these skill sets in more detail, but just thinking about the 5: hunting, reaching the right decision maker to have the right conversation, really consultative selling, which if we back up from there, before people are really willing to answer those hard questions that we need to ask and those questions that cause our prospect to see us as the expert, we have to have a strong relationship. And I don't just mean, hey, how you doing and how your family and is that, the trophy on your wall. I mean, real hardcore, the ability to create instant rapport, the ability to be the instant expert so that your prospect believes you, trusts you, and wants to answer those questions for you. And finally, the 5th one is the ability to bring value. And it's not just the value of your product, the value of your service. It's not just one step in the sales process. Value starts from moment 1 until you sign the contract or until you close the file. So those 5 in short summary: hunting, finding new business, reaching the right person and getting the right person involved earlier in the sales process, being able to build the right relationship, a strong, trusting relationship, having the right questions and enough of the right questions to ask to show your expertise. And then, of course, the ability to bring value that your products, your services, and you as the individual can help the client solve their problems.
Well, Rocky, those are 5 amazing requirements or skills that you just brought up, and I can really resonate with relationship building and value proposition, right? To kind of separate ourselves. And I was going to ask you how you came up with these 5 opportunities to work on, but you share some amazing background of 35 years and 35,000 companies. You have a lot of data where you were able to grab this information from, correct?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we can slice and dice that data any way we want. So, for example, and maybe you didn't ask the question, but I think I kind of heard a question in there I'm going to answer, which is a rule we don't want to break when we're prospecting, which is answering questions that weren't asked. But I'm going to go ahead and break that rule in our interview today. But if we look at, and we did the research, we looked at those 5 skills, what are the average performers' scores for those 5 skills? What are the bottom performers' scores? And what are the top performers' scores? So just starting at the top of hunting, if we take a look at hunting skill set, which is made up of about 10 separate attributes, things like will prospect, prospects consistently, goes for the decision maker, follows up appropriately, not overly following up with something that's dead, but following up in a timely manner, getting a response, getting people to respond to your messaging, whichever vehicle you decide to use, and several others. If we look at the bottom, really the 10% of the salespeople that we measure with those strengths and skills, their overall score, which is the number of attributes they have that make up that competency, is 30%. Now, if you compare that with the top 10% of salespeople and their score being 89%, you can see very quickly how hunting is certainly something that is going to cause salespeople to be a lot more successful if they have most or all of those attributes that make up the hunting competency.
Hey, Rocky, there's another thing that about those 5 that jumped out at me. One was about the right questions. And, I oftentimes see when I work with sales leaders and salespeople that the kind of questions you might ask your customer in that discovery phase really sets you apart from everyone else. If you're, being insightful, I even like to use the word challenging to the customer, where they sort of go, "Oh, wow, I didn't think of it that way," or something of that nature. What's your take on that as it relates to the right questions and some of the research that you know about?
Yeah, so consultative selling, just to give you some statistics and stay with that theme for a minute, has 12 attributes. And those are things like ask enough questions, ask the right questions, ask hard questions, ask questions that are meaningful to your prospect and your client and their business. And there are 7 more, right? So if we look at the skill sets of the bottom performers, consultative selling is 17% of those attributes. The top performers, the consultative selling score average is, for the top 10%, 62. So when we think about consultative selling, there's probably not a president, a CEO, a VP, a sales manager that you would run across and consultative selling would not be new to them. Many people say, "Oh, we already do consultative selling. We've already done that program." Well, they probably have, but when you ask someone, what are the 3 or 5 hardest questions you ask every prospect? Write those down for me. They can't come up with them. And so salespeople tend to rush the sales process, and they want to rush the bonding and rapport. They want to rush the discovery. They think they already have the solutions, and they might, and they think they already know what's going to happen, and they might, and then they rush to the presentation and hope to overwhelm the prospect or client with all the great services and features and benefits and all of those things. So when you think about consultative selling, it's really about slowing down the sales process. It's about asking those hard-hitting questions that your competition is not asking. It's about asking questions that you should ask, but you might be a little bit of afraid that it's going to offend someone. But the questions really is what shows your expertise and your ability to understand their problems. So each company, each organization, each industry will be different, and those all need to be customized to the client, to the individual sale, to the prospect. But salespeople don't take enough time to think about what are the questions that are going to cause my prospect to go, "Nobody's ever asked me that. I don't know." And that will expose more problems and blind spots that the prospect didn't know they have, which helps you also as a salesperson to bring more value to this situation.
Yeah, it's funny how all of this is somewhat interconnected, Rocky. All 5 of these mandatory skills do play a little interconnection each other, because as we were discussing, asking those insightful questions and those hard questions is also a little bit of part about building rapport. Even though we talk about, "Oh, I want to get to know you personally in some way," because we do want to understand what people's personal wins are by either not taking action or taking action.
Sure.
But still, I just think it builds on each other a whole lot. What are your thoughts, Jim?
No, I love that takeaway, Kendley, and Rocky. As I was listening to you, you were providing some amazing statistics, and it's amazing how many salespeople would describe themselves as self-taught, because a lot of this stuff that you do or that we do isn't being provided.
Yeah.
And how quickly they forget the information because it's not being put into practice. I remember in my early days where a sales question for me was, "Hey, what's going on? What can I do for you today?" And weirdly enough, most of the time it was met with a nothing and move along.
Yeah.
So I learned the hard way, unfortunately, but battle scars, I guess, go a long way. So I really, Kenley, to say that really resonated with me as well as a great takeaway.
Yeah, you've got the right idea there, Jim, when you say salespeople are kind of self-taught. And imagine if you were to get on a plane and the pilot came on and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be taking off. We're going to get up to about 35,000 feet altitude, if the seat comes on, the lights, the oxygen, all that stuff. Oh, and by the way, this is my first day flying, and I've never flown a 747 before, and I've never really been in a cockpit before. How comfortable would you be?
Yeah,
and that's what companies are doing with their salespeople. They're giving them a little bit of information, and they're saying, here, go do what you do, good luck. And there's just not nearly enough professional sales development out there. And sales is really, kind of one of the frowned upon careers, when in reality, it's the best career you could ever have. I mean, nobody wakes up in 8th grade on career day and says, I want to be in sales when I grow up, So it tends to be a career of default. And then the people that don't understand sales don't really understand and get it, and it's fuzzy and kind of hard to hold. And for those who were successful and got their way to the top by selling, they never took the time to break down what they did actually to be able to transfer that to other people. So that's where we come in, and you guys come in, and sharing information and helping people learn there is an art, of course, there is a science as well. And that science really is the way to create predictable outcomes.
Excellent. Love it.
Rocky, real briefly, next question for you is maybe a double question is, how did you come up with these 5, and a little bit about the implications of not having them? What are the implications if you don't have that information?
Yeah, great question, Kenley. I think if you look back over the last 35 years, we've been through 4 recessions, right? It was the oil crisis, it was the banking crisis, it was the .bomb crisis, it was the 2008 financial crisis, it was now the global slowdown, the global crisis, whatever they're calling it. It's funny, they haven't named this one yet, but I'm sure the news will find a way to do that soon. But if you go back and look at the data for the salespeople that are top performers during these economic tough times, which we've got data that dates back 35 years, we can compare what are those skill sets that we have already identified with these 5 by really removing the ones that were not impactful. So if you think about, let's go back 4 years ago, the market was flying. Companies were doing great. The economy was well. It was difficult to find salespeople because they were all sucked up into the marketplace. And you compare the findings of salespeople that were top performers in their organizations then to the salespeople that weren't, there wasn't a lot of difference because the top performers really weren't doing that many things different. But then fast forward, another year, and now you've got COVID, and everybody's shutting down, and everybody's freaked out about what the world is going to do and how they're going to, move forward. And, are we going to lose our business, or is nobody going to buy anything? Is money over? And then, of course, the government shoved billions of dollars into the marketplace, and some companies flourish from that and others kind of set back. But when times get hard, it's more difficult to reach people. I think we could all agree with that. It's more difficult even today than it was 5 years ago to get somebody to pick up the phone, right? So that hunting skill set and the ability to be consistent with your prospecting and just make the dials, make the calls, send the emails, knock on the doors, whatever it is, ask for referrals, create the strategic alliances, attend events like this. You have to be really diligent and really committed to do those kinds of things that most salespeople don't want to do. So hunting becomes really important when it's hard. And then, of course, reaching the decision maker. I'm sure there are many people in the audience today who have heard just this week already, being Monday, we have budgets that are frozen. Well, we can't do that this year. Everything's been shut down. Well, give us a call in 6 months. There's some type of objection around the financial projections of the people you're trying to sell to. And most salespeople just kind of say, okay, well, I'll call you back. When we could be saying things like, well, when you wanted to do something in the past and budgets were frozen, what did you do to make that happen? Well, if this was something that you really saw a huge return with, I mean, who else cares about this? in your organization. And so we've got to continue to keep the dialogue going, and we've got to ask the right questions. So that decision making is really important to get to that decision maker. And I don't want to sound like every other salesperson out there and go, well, are you the decision maker on this? I mean, how many phone calls, Kenley and Jim, do you guys get a week with, lately it seems to be cleaning services? Can I talk to the person in charge of cleaning services?
Yes.
It's ridiculous. So some marketing company has done a really good job of selling cleaning companies to make all those calls for them in the last few months, right? So when times get tough, you have to hunt more because you've got fewer opportunities. You've got to get the decision maker involved earlier in the process. And it's kind of like, what's the old fable about the chicken and the pig at breakfast, right? Which one is more committed? Well, the chicken's going to lay an egg, but the pig's got to die to be breakfast. So the pig is a lot more committed. And therefore, if you're not getting the person in the organization you're selling to who owns the problem, who has the most to lose, if things don't get solved and problems don't get fixed, and that area of whatever solution you provide, whoever's going to have the most personal consequences is who you have to get involved. Even if they don't have any money, even if they're out of the country, even if they work from home, you've got to get those people involved and get to them. It's a lot harder to get to them, no doubt, but the questions that you ask, that first contact you make, and the individual that's going to be your champion is how you get that person involved sooner.
Wow, Rocky, there's a lot to unpack in all those comments there. Really is. But it's come to a portion of our show where we get to highlight our show sponsor. And we're so fortunate today that it's Sales Development Expert, which is actually you, Rocky LaGrone. So we're going to take a short pause for a sponsor break, and we'll come back and dive into the last part of these questions to unpack what you just said.
Thank you. Since 1991, we've been helping small businesses and mid-market companies get to the next level. Hi, I'm Rocky LaGrone, President and CEO of Sales Development Expert. Today, we're finding that a lot of presidents, CEOs, and owners are concerned that their salespeople aren't selling enough because of the economic conditions. Sometimes they're just selling to the same accounts and they're not getting enough new business. Other times it's that bottom 20% of the sales team that just continues to keep turning over. Often we find too that while sales managers are great people and they do their best, they just don't know what they don't know. We can help you get to the next level. Give us a call. We'd love to talk, have an initial conversation, and see if we think we can help each other and grow your business. Have a great day. Good selling. I'm Rocky LaGrone, your sales development expert.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Rocky. So I have a question for you, but in your conversation, I thought of another question that I'm really curious about. There's no question that hunting is super important, especially in tougher times. That need is never going to go away. But what are your thoughts briefly about mining more opportunities with the people you already have relationships with?
Oh yeah, that's probably one of the most overlooked areas and vehicles for generating new business, and that's referrals. You don't get them unless you give them. And so I had this conversation recently with one of the executives I coach, and she was like, yeah, but I don't have any referrals to give. I said, well, yes, you do. I mean, if you know that your cousin needs a roof and she's in Dallas and you know a roofing company in Dallas, you're going to connect them, and that's a referral. A lot of people get this referral thing confused. They want to do, kind of tit for tat. Well, I'm going to give you one, you give me one. I'm going to give you one, you give me one. That's a strategic alliance. That is a lot different than giving referrals. So whatever we want out of life, no matter what it is, if it's love, give love first. If it's money, give money first. If it's referrals, give referrals first. And whatever you give comes back to you tenfold. And we've all heard that, but do you practice it? So every chance I get, I give a referral to somebody about something. And through that, it creates that sales karma that allows us to be able to expect that our clients are going to give us referrals. The other thing I think a lot of salespeople overlook is how do we get our clients to become our sales team? And the way you do that is by over-serving, by exceeding expectations, and then asking. And you don't want to ask like, hey, Jim, do you know anybody I could talk to? Because that creates a fuzzy thought process. I want to ask in the sense of, hey, Jim, do you have any business colleagues that you think might be interested in talking to us? Or as I listen through the conversation, Jim, if you and I are talking, you might bring up a vendor, you might bring up an old client, you might bring up somebody, and I'm going to mark that name in my head. And before that meeting is over, I'm going to say, hey, Jim, a few minutes ago, you talked about KENDLEY and what he's doing with his business. Do you think he would be interested in talking with me? And through identifying names and specificity, when asking for referrals, it's better for them to warm that database up and get those names in their head, right? So if I say, KENDLEY, don't think of a blue elephant, what comes to mind?
Right.
So I've got to kind of help plant those thoughts and those seeds. So very overlooked and not nearly enough focus on referrals.
So Rocky, I love that answer. So build up sales equity is what I heard by providing referrals. Yeah. So back to your 5 skills real quick. So some of them are a little on the subjective side about talking about building relationships and value in that. So how would you recommend a sales leader measure those skills?
Well, as a self-plug, you could measure them by using our sales analysis tools, and we can help you get the science behind it. But certainly when a manager is coaching a salesperson, they should be asking those questions about, tell me about the prospect. What did you do to add value? What did you learn about that person as an individual? What modes of communication did you recognize with them? How did you adapt to their particular style? What were the things that you did differently with this person to cause the relationship to happen that you wouldn't have done with someone else you met with last week? So measuring is all about the sales manager really knowing what to measure and what questions to ask to measure, and then implementing that into their coaching sessions.
Love it.
Rocky, it made me start thinking about if your organization doesn't really have all of these, or they are a little weak on some of them, how would you go about getting them? How does a sales leader out there or manager go, gosh, I can get better at some of this? What action steps would you have them take?
Well, again, as a self-plug, you could call us and we can help you. But there are many books out there. There are many self-development programs out there. All you have to do is go to Google and type in how to get better at sales, and there's going to be a million things there. I would tell you that every individual needs to be using a sales process and a sales system, because that's what helps repeat success. Certainly companies say they have it, but then we will go and look at the organization and we ask the salespeople to tell us what step 3 of their 5-step process. They can't name it. So while they talk about it, give it lip service, they don't actually measure it and hold people accountable to it. So I don't care what you use, as long as you use something that's consistent, as long as you use something that's a common language. I mean, we have a system, we've modified thousands of systems, we've created new systems for companies. A rose is still a rose if you call it something else. So I don't care what it is. There's so much out there that there's really no excuse for not finding it as a sales leader.
The scalable, repeatable process is so important.
Yeah, absolutely.
So something comes to mind for me, Rocky, when we think about, we have our existing team, and sometimes there's attrition, or sometimes we're growing and we need new people. So now if I'm the sales leader and I'm thinking about being strategic in hiring somebody that already has these skills, or maybe they don't, how do I determine that in an interview?
Yeah, well, there's lots of things that need to be done before the interview. First of all, with our sales hiring system and process, we would recommend that you first really identify, what is that ideal salesperson? Who are they calling on? What's the sales cycle? What kind of money are they having to ask for? How do you manage those individuals? What kind of resistance do they face in the marketplace? How are they going to be selling? Is it face-to-face, telephone? So there's a myriad of questions that we help people answer to identify that ideal salesperson. And if you think about what most companies do, they say, I need a salesperson. And then they write an ad. And the ad describes the company and it describes the opportunity. And it sounds like every other ad on every job board out there. And every salesperson that reads it, you're going to get a bunch of people that are just looking to fill in their unemployment card and say, I applied here. And you're not really going to attract the right people. So we want to write ads very differently that disqualify salespeople, that get rid of the riffraff, that don't come in, that even in hard times when it's hard to find salespeople, we write ads that are very different, that attracts a different kind of person, because we want them to read the ad and go, wow, that's me. I got to apply there. So we're going to do a lot of what I would call psychodynamics and looking at that profile and say, okay, who is this person? Where do they live? Where do they go? What do they do for fun? Where do they spend their personal time? How do they go about their day-to-day life? And then we've got to get our ad in front of them. And that's not always job boards. There are a myriad of other sourcing that we use when we're helping companies attract the right salespeople. And then certainly, once you get past the phone screen, if you're using our assessments, we're going to tell you whether they're recommended or not recommended. And that doesn't mean they're recommended for hire automatically as much as they would be recommended for the next step of the interview process. And in that report, we'll identify the 21 core competencies that are weighted based on your profile. But more importantly to your question, what questions do I ask them? Well, think about salespeople. They're typically better at first impressions than the people that are doing the hiring. They're typically better at telling somebody what they think they want them to hear than the person that's doing the interviewing. So we've got to ask questions in somewhat of a stealth mode and ask A-B kind of questions, and questions that cause the salesperson to expose their strengths or cause them to expose their weaknesses. For example, if I'm looking for somebody that's really going to hunt, I got to ask them, let's suppose we give you a list and we believe this list has $1 million worth of revenue in it, and we're not doing any business with any of these people. How are you going to go about getting in touch with them? Well, what kind of marketing do you have? That's a common answer. Well, what kind of sales tools and resources do you give us? I want the person that says, well, I'm going to call them, of course. Okay. You mean to tell me after all the stuff you've done in your career, you're just going to pick up the phone and call somebody? So I want to kind of discount what they say a little bit and see how they step up or don't. And I want to be able to ask the right questions. It's going to tell me what's going to happen 90 days after I hire them before I ever make them the offer. So we're going to look at salespeople in that interview more as an audition as opposed to what the typical interview would be, which would be, hey, Jim, this job requires prospecting. You okay with that? We're going to ask you to make $100 a day. Oh, yeah, no problem. Yeah, I love prospecting. Not really.
Wow,
So
that's
no
really
one
excellent. It's a lot there. We've just had such an engaging conversation, and we could really spend a whole lot more time in each one of these subject areas of these 5 areas. And we really didn't get to spend some time in some of them as much as I'd like to. But Rocky, with the last minute or two we have to wrap up our session with you today, what would you like to tell us? What have we missed? What is maybe a key takeaway or a key summary you'd like to leave our audience with?
Well, I think if you think about what goes on in real life certainly goes on in sales, and what people think they know isn't exactly what they always know. And I'm just going to give you a quick example. I had plantar fasciitis for about 18 months. And if you've ever had that, it's the tendons on the bottom of your foot ache and hurt, and it hurts to walk or do anything. I got all the internet gadgets. I talked to doctors. I went to see professionals, chiropractors, all this stuff, and nothing worked. It just continued to be a problem for me. So I was at a wedding and I was talking to a young man who was in physical therapy school and he was about to graduate. And I explained to him my problem. He goes, ice your calves. I said, I don't have any problem with my calves. He goes, it's your calves that are pulling on your tendons on the bottom of your foot that are causing the pain. I iced my calves for 2 nights in a row. I've never had another problem. So what we think is the problem is not always the problem. When salespeople aren't generating new business, it's really helpful to identify what is the cause of that. Because when we remove the cause, it goes away forever. When we address the symptom, it rears its ugly head in some other ineffective behavior or outcome. So evaluate your sales teams. Whether you use me or somebody else, I don't care, but that's the first place to start. Raise the bar for your sales hires. You want to bring in A players. People are going to elevate the entire team. Look what happened when Tom Brady was brought on board with the Buccaneers 3 years ago. Went to the Super Bowl. They raised the value of the entire team. Raise your expectations and don't allow continued excuses of why people can't help you grow.
Love it.
Wow, Rocky, that is just really, I think, spot on closing advice for everyone. And I hope that, the good news is it's recorded. You can go back and listen over and over again to make sure you catch every one of them.
Well, thank you guys for the opportunity to be a guest. If you've got some topics we didn't get to cover, invite me back in the future. Love to be part of your show. Love what you guys are doing. Thank you again. Really appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rocky.
We very much appreciate you, Rocky, and thank you for all of your support. And Jim, we're going to have another show coming up in a month, aren't we?
We are. I'm super excited about it as well, KENDLEY. Why don't you tell everybody who we got coming on?
Well, I'm excited to announce that we're going to have 2 guests with us next month, and that's going to be Wayne Nielsen and Monty Peterson. They're going to really have an unbelievable topic. Really, it's about what causes sales to happen, but it's really the strategy execution for sales leaders, because a lot of what Rocky talked about is some of those fine details and those fine points, but they're going to talk about how this gets executed against and where the pitfalls of good, strong execution and strategy come apart. And they're experts in this field, and I'm really looking forward to having both Wayne and Monty join us.
Execution is awesome. I think it's Ben Franklin. I'm going to paraphrase: knowledge without activity is wasted.
Absolutely. Well, everyone, next month on the first Monday in March at 4 p.m. Eastern time, me and Jim will be right back here with our guests, Wayne and Monty, and that'll be every month going forward. We so much appreciate you joining us today. And if you were listening in live, thank you. And if you're listening on our podcast or YouTube channel, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Jim if any questions you have. And if you want to learn about the Sales Leader Roundtable, again, reach out to us. We do these monthly sessions on the 4th Wednesday of each month at 12 noon Eastern. So, Jim, thanks again. Look forward to seeing you again next month.
Yep. Thanks, KENDLEY. Take care. See you, everybody.
Thank you for joining us today. You are now eligible to attend the peer-to-peer professional development network of the Sales Leader Roundtable. It is held on the 4th Wednesday of each month at 12 o'clock noon Eastern Standard Time. For an invitation, email us at info@salesleaderroundtable.com or visit us at www.salesleaderroundtable.com. Our next show is scheduled for the first Monday of each month. We hope you will join us again.